Hello and welcome to another Helios Spotlight interview. Today we are joined by Idan from Upland and me, and Chris Barnes as well. So Idan, would you be able to tell us a bit about yourself and what your involvement's been like with Upland?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here. So my name is Idan Zuckerman. I'm one of three original co-founders of Upland, together with Dirk Luth and Mani Hollenstein, and currently serve as also as co-CEOs together with Dirk Luth for Upland. I've been involved in this project now probably 3.5 years, probably just a tiny bit more. So we've been really early on, gone through all different stages of the projects. Like first stages was like hiding the fact that NFTs were anything about it, trying to hide the fact that there's blockchain behind it because nobody knew what it meant. Then going through different hype phases and growth phases. But as of today, I think Upland is one of the biggest metaverses out there, with probably now over 215,000 landowners. And kind of like up until now, around 2.5 million NFTs minted. Some north of probably $5 million have been kind of like in US dollars have been exchanged between players and earned. Even though our what we call the NFT to USD program is still in beta. So pretty good, pretty great participation. Upland is geared and kind of like have been targeted always to appeal to mass consumer audiences. So it's we've taken a lot of efforts to make blockchain, to democratize true ownership and blockchain technology, make it available through apps that are actually apparent in the App Store. So we are available to download on the iTunes Store, on Google Play, but also available to play on desktop. And yeah, that's about that in a very high level.
That's great. Yeah. So 215,000 users, is that what you said?
No, that's 215,000 landowners. So we have more users than that. And we can go through different metrics. They're all basically public. So the way it goes, you can own land in Upland, but not yet truly own it. So we have like a very clever system that enables you to start playing for free. At that point, you are considered a visitor to Upland. So there's a lot of players who play that. They don't enjoy true ownership yet. So we don't consider them as landowners, even though they may own properties in Upland. As you graduate to an Uplander, so you need to accumulate a net worth of 10,000 UPX or above, which is roughly the equivalent of $10 in value. Then you basically graduate to status of an Uplander. You don't need to then come back to kind of renew your visa every 7 days. But that's also the point in time where your own EOS account is basically attributed to your Upland account. And from then on, you enjoy true ownership, meaning that we as operators no longer have access to your digital assets without your explicit permission, which is the whole premise of true ownership.
Right. Okay, that's clear for people to understand then. So Upland is obviously, this is the biggest application running on the EOS blockchain, on the EOS mainnet.
On the EOS, yeah.
And so the assets, the NFTs, are native on the EOS blockchain as well then.
Absolutely. And it's funny because it's a bit of a disservice to the EOS mainnet, because the vast majority of players playing Upland don't even realize they're using the EOS mainnet. And a funny story, I was recently spending some time with a prominent Upland player, just as a casual social setting. And he was going like, yeah, I own NFTs on whatever, on Solana and on Ethereum. And I'm gonna kind of like, you own a shit ton of NFTs on EOS, right? And he's like, yeah, sure, yeah, you know what, you're right. But our players don't think that way, just because we've made it so easy and so kind of like obfuscated to the fact that the players are just playing the game, enjoying the ecosystem, enjoying the value proposition, without having to worry necessarily what's behind it. And if you think about it, you guys, I'm assuming you guys play some sort of games, right? So whatever the game is you're playing, you don't care if in the background they have AWS or cloud or like Google Cloud or whatever it is, the technology that runs the guts on the back end. You care about the value proposition. So we're kind of like in Upland, we're focused on the future where, again, the entire industry graduates beyond the hype phase to the phase where consumers are focused on the value. And that's what we're optimizing for. And unfortunately, the result is that it may not do the justified service to the EOS mainnet as a great platform.
Sure, but I don't think you owe the EOS platform anything.
Oh,
It owes you, right? That's the whole point. Like it's a platform, an unbiased platform that's there to build performant applications on, like you've done.
absolutely, yes, I agree.
Yeah, so I'm curious. One last question, Wax. I'll let you get in there. But in terms of just the user experience, we know that sometimes people who do interact with EOS and are familiar sometimes run out of CPU and have to use the power up. It sounds like you've also abstracted that away from the user. They don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, it's a funny story. So again, we've been, we've been involved with EOS from its earliest days, and actually, the mechanism that allows us to basically stake resources in favor of our consumers, right, without them having to worry about it. So basically, we treat the costs of the blockchain the similar way that we treat costs for AWS or for any other backend stack that we utilize, right? But we just subsidize it for our players and then bake it into our business model. That mechanism actually was suggested by us to the team back then at Block One that worked on kind of like I forget if it was like EOS 1.8 or other iterations of it, but we actually collaborated with them to suggest that because we knew, again, our backgrounds come from a joint background of basically decentralized technologies and casual gaming. And again, you understand when you're targeting to reach mass audiences, things like gas prices or paying for CPU by ordinary consumers is a non-starter. So one of our most important things at the beginning was, okay, how do we figure out to present an ecosystem that still maintains the value proposition of true ownership, but doesn't require the player to pay funds, even if it's just cents every time they want to, let's say, collect their bonus or do like some kind of a transaction. So one of the earliest systems we put in place was that basically that mechanism that subsidized blockchain resources in favor of our players.
Awesome.
Very clever. So I think we've dived quite heavily into the kind of back end a little bit, and I'd like to explore and for you to describe to me the player experience and what that's like.
Sure. So again, when you get into Upland, the draw basically is like a Monopoly style property trading game, right? So this is kind of like the very much on the surface, because at the gut of it, it's about basically owning virtual real estate, developing it, trading it, and making it into something special. But basically, this is just the beginning. When you walk in, you understand that there's a full-blown metaverse going on there. And it's not just about owning the property, completing collections, trading with other Uplanders. Now you can start developing property. So today players are able to start building, erecting structures on top of their properties. And once those structures are complete, they are now even able to start running what we call meta ventures, which are player-run businesses on top of them. So you can now start again today. Meta ventures is in beta, for example. And we launched two types of businesses, which are basically secondary market resellers of local NFTs. But very soon, for example, you'll be able to start manufacturing things in Upland. So again, Upland has, Apex in Upland is the value carrier. That's the fungible currency that is internal to Upland, where you use to either buy things or pay for services. And then we have a resource called Spark, which is a token that you stake in favor of manufacturing or constructing inanimate objects on top of the map. So one of the very exciting meta ventures that are coming up within probably Q3 of this year is, for example, outdoor decor manufacturing shops. So you can actually go in, design 3D elements. You can, whatever, statues or garden gnome on fences, start manufacturing them in Upland as 3D items, and all of these are obviously NFT because any digital asset in Upland is an NFT, and then sell them to the community at the price that you determine, or create whatever kind of varieties or NFT series or rarities that you imagine. So now we really getting into user-generated content, and again, another cool aspect is that as Upland we have a lot of partnerships with very exciting brands. One example already announced and deployed was the NFL Player Association. We want to marry the community and kind of create the bond between the community and these brands, so communities can leverage brand IP for their creations, obviously with the right revenue share that is appropriated with it. But now, instead of kind of like getting brands into the metaverse and having them just sell NFTs, we want to use those brands to empower the community to create value of their own. And again, when you marry concepts like our third-party developer platform, which we launched this year, right now you can tie experiences that you create on top of that to complement those NFTs. So it's a very, very elaborate ecosystem that will just go and kind of like expand. What I always say at the end of the day, if people ask me what is Upland like in one sentence, right? We are trying to build the biggest digital open economy that the world has ever seen. And I think we are now really starting to see the pathways for how to get there. Just another thing kind of like very exciting coming up this year that kind of like especially our community is very excited about is cars and transportation in Upland. So one interesting thing about Upland, which is not usual to compared to other metaverses, and even if you go back like to places like Second Life and Minecraft, etc. In most metaverses, you're able to just teleport from one location to another in a blink of an eye. In Upland, we've put together a system of transportation that puts basically friction into travel. Which means, for example, if you are today in Upland and you are in San Francisco, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Upland is mapped to the real world. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a game that's digital layer that's overlaid on top of the real world. So if I'm currently in San Francisco in Upland, right, my Upland projection is in San Francisco, and I want to get to New York, it will take me both time and resources to do so. So I have to either catch a plane, go to SFO, catch a plane to JFK, and pay for my ticket, and it will take me about roughly 45 to 50 minutes to get there, or I can take trains. I could start going from San Francisco, let's say, to Chicago, and then take a train from there to New York. It will take me a bit more time to be a bit more cheap. But so why did we do that? Is number one, we want to cast actual essence to the meaning of virtual localities. Because again, if I just can jump from one place to another magically, what does it mean that I live in a specific neighborhood, or who are my neighbors, right? Because I can just do whatever I want. That friction basically strengthens the notion of virtual localities, and it has meaning to my decision point. Where do I want to live in Upland? Who do I want my neighbors to be? Where do I want my votes to count, right? In which kind of like neighborhoods, or which DAO system that kind of like aggregates up in Upland. And the other thing is now that opens up entirely new use cases for cars, because again, if you look about car NFTs today in the world, right, mostly it will be about two things. One's just collecting and trading, which is basically any NFT project has that. And maybe some projects have some racing elements. In Upland, right, once we have that transportation system, now cars go way, way beyond that, because now I can use my car as a means of personal transportation. I would still have to pay for it. I would still have to kind of like, pay for gas and to charge it. And by the way, in Upland, our cars actually track odometers and kind of like track potential damage, etc. So it's very elaborate NFTs. But then I could also take passengers with me, right? And you can think about, hey, what if there's a city in Upland that is not connected via public transportation? Now people with cars can offer services and drive other Uplanders to those places. And that's why, for example, in Upland, we also have vans, right? So, passenger-oriented transportation that is not necessarily very good for racing, but it has a lot of utility. Or I can take cargo with me, because if I manufacture an auto decor item, again, it can't magically move from one city to another. It would have to be hauled by either a semi-trailer truck or a van, or a car that has the capacity to carry it. So there's a lot of utility kind of like involved in this. So again, I can keep talking for hours, but maybe it's best for you guys to focus me on the kind of like where is the most interesting piece of it.
Well, you said a ton of really cool things there. So it sounds like you're really trying to emulate real life, like that. Yeah, the idea of digital locality meaning something. Well, obviously it does in real life as well. So you're emulating that, which I think our brains obviously can connect to, because we are living in real life. So now when we enter the Upland metaverse, this digital space, it feels familiar. So I have a couple questions. One, is there augmented reality, like a VR glass headset type of thing that's sort of interplayed with Upland, or is it coming?
Yeah, and it's a question we obviously get a lot, and I have a couple of ways to answer it. So first of all, let's talk about immersive experiences, right? And now Upland is on its base, right, on the mobile app, on the surface, is like a semi-immersive, let's say, digital space, right? you can walk in there, right? Your portal, your mobile device may be your portal of entry at the end of the day. You see a 2D map. When you zoom in, it becomes semi 3D. You can see all the 3D elements. You can move it around. You can spectate it. But you don't, like, full immersion is not a prerequisite for you to interact with the Upland metaverse. But now, as we're starting to create these fully immersive experiences, and one example of it, which we already demoed at South by Southwest, is spectating car races in Upland. So any street, any highway can become a racetrack, and you can actually take your cars and race them in Upland. And this is done like in Unity in full 3D. Already we have functioning demos that players have played around with. So now you can immerse yourself, right? So immersion becomes a possibility, but not a prerequisite for it. Once you have these fully immersive experiences, it becomes a question: how do you consume those experiences? And they can be consumed, by just using like a 2D app that emulates 3D, so like a mobile device or a desktop, and you'll get that type of experience. But at the same time, you can walk to a rooftop in Upland that somebody owns, and then put on your Oculus, and then have the same experiences, but now it's like in full 3D, full immersion VR. So again, this is more about the consumer's choice of how they want to consume the experience, not necessarily for us to dictate, hey, we want this to be VR, we want that to be Unity, etc. So that's basically our take. But I think the important point here is, again, we know that, again, we've seen, we see the resurgence of metaverses in the past, half a year, ever since Mark Zuckerberg announced Meta, with our cool projects around. You can think about Sandbox, Decentraland, all the the default one that comes to mind when you think about blockchain-based metaverses. But kind of like all of them do have that requirement of full immersion as a prerequisite. And I think a similar thing happened with Second Life. Again, the mother of all metaverses, the mother of all virtual economies. And by the way, these guys are still around. It's still a thriving metaverse with a lot of participants. I think what it demonstrated, though, is that there is some kind of like a glass ceiling to the population that is at this point willing to be fully immersed all of the time. So again, we haven't seen that adopted to tens of millions to billions of people that actually use that on a daily basis. And I think this was one of the reasons why we took Upland as kind of like this more, I would say, realistic approach where, okay, I can offer these experiences to a lot of consumers, but not all of them will just have to be immersed all the time. And this is where you start seeing Upland now becoming this middle ground that is more applicable to a large population.
That's perfect. Yeah, user's choice. The other question I had then, something you said was cool, was about DAOs and like this ability to, so you've got like homeowners associations or something, right? When you got people like, so is that there? Is that coming? Because there's a lot of compartmentalized or like Lego blocks that can be built into this platform. It seems kind of
absolutely. So
so much.
The cool thing about Upland is that it has a built-in governance system, and you don't have to create like tokens or something else to support it, right? And you don't need to necessarily have that conflict of, okay, if I'm rich and I have the most tokens, do I get the most vote? Do I get to decide just what the things will look like? So, and the way it works is that, and it's going to come this year, is you as an Uplander that is verified and kind of like have been KYC'd. And by the way, KYC is a big part of Upland. So it's a good tool for us to basically vet out people that are real humans and kind of like not just able to interact with US dollars, which is cognitively very easy to do as a consumer, but also now do things like determine what is your home address in Upland. Right, so you get one kind of like shot to declare that, and you can move around, but with kind of like slowdowns and penalties. But let's say you say, hey, I'm going to live in whatever, the Sunset neighborhood in San Francisco. This is where my home is, and this is my official address. So now inherently, first of all, that gives you a vote in Upland as a whole. So there are going to be some resolutions they're going to go put in place to the community, and the community can vote on. And again, it's one KYC person equals one vote in Upland. But the more interesting stuff is now by that virtue, I can also vote on resolutions that have to do with my neighborhood. And one very small example is now as we introduce more UGC content and Uplanders are able to also design like the houses that they built, etc. A neighborhood can decide, for example, hey, you know what? I don't want to have factories in my neighborhood. I just want to have residential buildings. So these are resolutions that may be applicable only to your neighborhood. Same thing in the terms of the city. Maybe one day there are going to be mayors, right? So how do you elect the mayors? Well, you have your official designated home address as a means of a DAO. Probably in 2023 or somewhere down the road, we're going to introduce life into Upland, right? So absolutely, you can own your pet or you can grow a tree in your backyard. But hey, does every neighborhood want cows to be in their kind of like in the backyard? Maybe not. So these are things that you can actually easily delegate to the community to vote on, and on a local setting, not necessarily on a global setting as a whole.
The cows would be amazing if they shout out digital NFT turds that you could take to your garden to let them grow your tree bigger.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So you must have a huge team working on this. There's a lot going on, it sounds like, and a lot in the pipeline.
Yeah, so today we are, I believe we are about 115 team members in Upland. Wow. So we've experienced a huge amount of growth over the past year. I think we announced our Series A fundraising last year in November, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so and Upland is, again, it's you know, the business is thriving, the game is thriving, the economy is thriving. So we're in a good place for sure.
Is there any advice you would give to someone who is joining Upland right now as a new player?
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, the most excitement in Upland today is usually generated around CD releases. And again, we only release CDs kind of like per the economy's ability to absorb the supply. So usually it's going to be in reaction to either if local markets sell out or global markets are about to sell out, or that certain economic elements that require the additional opening of cities. But the thing is that creates situations where this is probably, again, by the way, as Uplanders, we're not allowed to play Upland as employees of Upland, because that will create potentially conflicts of interest. So we always get to just view that excitement from the side. But city openings are really, really cool things, because you get tens of thousands of players converging into the same space, trying to mint a lot of time very competitively the same properties. And actually, in our the most recent city we released was Queens in New York City. That was, I think, probably 3 weeks ago. It's one of our most successful city launches to date. And at the very first minutes of the release, we were able to mint about 50 property NFTs per second to the EOS mainnet. And if you think about transaction, it probably produces around whatever 350 transactions pushed successfully to the blockchain per second. So really, really good experience, really smooth for our players. And again, it's not trivial, because you're dealing with very proprietary technologies. There's no manual, there's no cheat sheet. You can't go to Google to see how you can code certain things. So it's always been like a learning curve for us. And being at that tip point, right, where it's very rewarding to be able to just experience that type of challenges and be the first one to try to solve them. So it's really pretty cool experience also on the technological side. But again, back to the point for what would be my recommendation for new Uplanders. Definitely participate with city releases, even if they're not happening immediately. Wait for them, and also work with our community members to get educated. There's endless amount of material created by our community that would educate you how to get started, how to team up with other Uplanders and maybe provide them services, and that's possible in Upland. How to try to basically, what are the best places to start minting, how to approach collections, how to trade with other Uplanders to optimize your portfolio, and then create some strategies for the long run. Which, like, do you want to run maybe a meta venture? What would be the case for that? What do you want to do? Look at our roadmap, right? Try to think about, are cars interesting to you? Maybe you want to optimize there. Maybe you want to be a manufacturer. Do you know any good designers and kind of like that can produce 3D models? Maybe you can become like an outdoor decor producer or a structure ornament producer. So there's a lot of pathways to become successful in Upland. And I think the best part is still in the future. So really still a good time to join this economy.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
So you mentioned 350 NFTs minted in a second or something, right?
Sorry, it was 50 NFTs minted in a second, but there are a lot of other transactions that support that, right? So you know, a lot of times people need to get currency, so they buy Upland, so they need to kind of like so in Upland, if you want to move from place to place, you utilize other people's properties to kind of like jump around with your what we call it's your avatar. Basically, we call it the block explorer, right? So sometimes you have to pay other people for using the properties to jump around. That's another transaction. So there's a lot of transactions that support the actual minting of properties.
Yeah, so where I was going with that is, this is obviously, you spoke earlier about how, you know, a lot of people don't know they're using EOS and it doesn't really giving back to the EOS ecosystem. That's fine. Is there like a dashboard at all that shows because you couldn't do this on Ethereum, obviously, like that type of throughput is impossible or extremely expensive at it, right? Like, so is there any sort of dashboard that people can go to and maybe use that to highlight or anything there? That, because I'm just thinking that's like a great statistic. That's like that's a tweet waiting to happen. It's like, look at what just happened on Upland. This is why EOSIO is superior technology.
Absolutely. I mean, we obviously have all the data internally, and we track it both kind of like from the blockchain perspective and our backend that knows that, okay, we push successfully transactions. And so we absolutely have that data. Making it visible should be easy, but I think you can also see it like on the mainnet, right? Everything is public. That's blockchain, right? So
yeah,
there should be ways also publicly to measure these things on top of the mainnet directly.
Yeah, I think I'll have to do, and maybe next time you've got a big sort of property release where all of a sudden the network usage goes up because of all the activity, we'll have we'll keep our eyes open for that and maybe do some scanning and kind of highlight the ability of EOS to facilitate what you're doing.
For sure. And by the way, that was part of the main reasons why we chose to go with EOS. I mean, you can imagine 3.5 years ago when we looked at our options, Ethereum was one of the default options to look at. It basically was the only blockchain back then. EOS hasn't launched yet. That was prior to June of 2019.
Okay.
But we just understood that Ethereum was not right for us because we can't achieve what we're trying to do with Ethereum back then. And back then EOS was the best option. And it has worked out really well for us.
Yeah, that's great.
I think I was looking at a tweet from someone today who was mentioning one of the other performant blockchains who have a large transactions per second statement, who were putting out roughly around 350 transactions per second in reality compared to their claimed metrics. So you could literally cover one of these very popular other networks entirely with just an Upland new location release. So it just shows how performant.
Yeah, and I think we haven't yet really touched the limits of EOS. A lot of the limitations we had, have to do not just with the blockchain itself, but how we actually mirror data and bring it to our backend in a way that creates a good consumer experience. And again, because again, you can imagine there are a lot of intricacies in this process, because give you one small example. When you mint a property as a player in Upland, you immediately get it. You see that you own it, but the transaction is not irreversible yet, right? So there's a period of time where you see kind of like in Upland, you see like a small hourglass. Hourglass, sorry, that says that it's securing ownership, but so you can't still do things with the properties until it's irreversible, but you see that you own it. So there's a lot of like complexities that come with it. How do you provide a good user experience and a fast user experience, but taking into consideration all the limitations of blockchain? But again, these are part of the things where we're trying to push the boundaries and kind of like take what the existing technologies we have today and make them palatable to consumer audiences that are used to very fast and very immediate actions as part of the gameplay.
Yeah, so it sounds like half a second blocks, obviously that's immediate for as far as humans go and our ability to perceive something, but the 90-ish second or whatever latency for finality is a problem. So are you following the work with the Scalability Plus working group and how they're looking to bring that down to 2 to 3 seconds?
I have not followed that, but I'd be more than happy to take a look.
Yeah, so that's the ENF, EOS Network Foundation, has a variety of working groups, and now the coalition that has for the EOSIO protocol development, you've got EOS, Telos, Wax, and the UX network have come together, put together an $8 million fund, and they're going to use that to basically scale EOSIO as a coalition. And one of the things they're going to work on early, it sounds like, is a Scalability Plus working group, which is to reduce finality to be 2 to 3 seconds. Another thing that the UX network, the team from EOS Titan, who you're probably familiar with, Guillaume, they've got IBC, inter-blockchain communication, that they are going to release soon. That's a trustless IBC across all EOSIO chains, but they've also got that worked out for Binance and Ethereum. I'm wondering, is that something that you're, in terms of like exploring other liquidity options and making your NFTs cross-chain, is that on your roadmap at all? Or?
Absolutely, but we approach it from a kind of like a layer 2 perspective, and again, we call it the NFT portal. And it's bi-directional. So the first direction of it is you're going to be able to take any NFT, whether it's ERC-721 or it's something on Solana or something on Telos, so that doesn't matter, and be able to. We already have like a functioning WAX integration, for example, and be able to get it from that blockchain into Upland. So it is going to be basically wrapped in a wrapper NFT that is on the mainnet, and then will be able to be tradable within Upland, usable in Upland until it gets back out in what we call a reclaim flow. So it's more like a layer 2 solution. And the same would be applicable in reverse. So you'll be able to take any Upland native NFT, and then after having been KYC'd, you'll be able to take it out to places like Ethereum or other blockchains, and then trade it on OpenSea, for example, if you choose to do so. So again, our approach for interoperability is more based on layer 2 solutions, kind of like wrapping tokens and kind of like keeping them in escrow for the time that they are being ported to the other location. But we definitely have strategical plans and need to think about interoperability that is more integrated, because again, we know today Upland has around, let's call it 100,000 DAUs. I think we peaked at around 160,000 DAUs. We are trying to optimize for a future where there are 10 million DAUs in Upland. And we know that at that point, one single blockchain is not going to be sufficient. There needs to be several chains that are going to be talking with each other. So definitely strategically, we have interoperability on minds.
Well, I definitely encourage you, if you haven't, to pay attention. Well, yeah, it'll be out and about. But what the UX team, the UX network, and that the trustless IBC bridge they're talking about is exactly that, where you can take aspects of a smart contract and have it execute on another chain to then basically do that horizontal scaling that allows the promised 1 million transactions a second that B1 told us about.
Yep, absolutely.
I like how we touched on how you're prepared always for the future of what's coming to Metaverse, and you'd already taken into consideration the use of VR headsets, etc., etc. And as they become more popular, you're ready for that. So where can you see Upland being in, say, next 5 to 10 years? How will the Metaverse in general continue to grow?
Yeah. So again, I think I iterated that what we're trying to do is build the world's largest digital economy. And I think we see the pathway for how we can get there. And as we progress towards that future, Upland will become more and more a platform, right? So we don't necessarily want to curate the experiences or curate the gaming loops or whatever value it is that is being offered to the end consumer. What we do want is basically to empower and give the community the tools to do that. And again, it's not coming from some kind of like an altruistic view or like a utopian view. We strongly believe with the movement. Again, people call it Web3 loosely, right? Like I think we've been thinking Web3 before people called it Web3, and I'm pretty sure that most people that say Web3 don't fully understand what it means, but there is a tectonic shift, I think, in the industry where huge tech companies are going to move from becoming the authority and kind of like the curator more to the facilitator side. And there's a huge business case to be had here, because if you have a giant ecosystem that is open, that millions and hopefully in the future billions of people are using, and you're just providing basically the engine, right? The infrastructure, the means, and basically you're just getting compensated for the activity that's happening in this economy. Now you can delegate now all of the experience curation and value creation to the people who are in the stakeholders that are involved in the ecosystem. So that's where I would want Upland to be in 5 years from now. So it's a place where you have, obviously tens of millions, hundreds of millions of stakeholders, all of them having different ways to extract value. Some of it by getting entertainment value, by just, whatever, racing in cars or playing first-person shooters in neighborhoods that are designated to be kind of like whatever, laser tag arenas or what have you. And some other will be in there just because they run their businesses there and this is how they make their living. And maybe some others have other value creation and experiences that we haven't even imagined yet. So this is definitely the future that we envision for Upland, and hopefully that will materialize.
Can you envisage like real world assets coming into Upland? I know you kind of merging there with brands at the moment, putting almost brand merchandise and stuff in there. Just wondering if you could link. So I buy my real house in Upland, and that's where I purchase it. I wonder if it's something like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think, and it's definitely things that we have been thinking about and are thinking about constantly. And I think it's another maybe good point to raise. Again, you can only do that. I mean, sure, you can do that without regulatory compliance. It's going to be very difficult for you to do that, let's say, operating from within the US, having customers in the US and basically staying out of jail or staying away from trouble. But I think just because we see that as an integral part of the future, this is, again, one of the main reasons we chose to, first of all, operate from within the US. And also work together with what regulation permits at these points and evolve with it, as opposed to totally ignore regulation and just say, okay, fuck it, we're just gonna do our thing. But I think by being that, even though it is limiting at some points, because again, obviously the regulation is limiting by definition. It does open up the pathways to do these types of things as long as you are regulated. So bringing in whatever, an old-timer car, a real old-timer car, tokenizing it, maybe creating a few instances of digital cars, but then maybe what you own, your digital car that you own also represents a fraction of what you own with the old-timer that is in a garage somewhere. That would make it a security. And again, you can't do that. You just, if you want to do it legally in the US, you need to follow, the rules and the laws. So I definitely think there is a realistic chance for us, not just to do those things, but to reach mass audiences and not exclude US-based consumers as part of it.
Yeah, amazing.
Love it. Any, as we've been going a good amount here, any sort of things we should be looking forward to coming from the Upland team? Some
very high profile partnerships that we're working with that are going to be announced later in the year. So really looking forward to see how those bring us another step forward towards mass adoption. And beyond that, I'm personally really excited about cars. I love cars. I love what we're doing there. There are going to be some things that we present probably within the next couple of months that are going to blow people's minds out. So I'm really looking forward to that.
When you mentioned you've got like 115 people on your team, and I'm thinking through all of the specializations you'd need. So like you say, you got cars. You're gonna have to have somebody who kind of knows about cars in order to create this virtual, semi-real world experience. Is there, if people are interested in joining your team, should they go to your website? Is it you constantly looking for people just to get that?
Absolutely. I think we're hiring about 2 to 3 people each week, new people to the team, constantly trying to grow. We're very greedy and picky, so we try to, to get, the best people that we can get our hands on. But absolutely, go to our website. We have openings, and people generally love to work for Upland. I think it's beyond the fact that we're a great team and very smart, capable, and nice people. We're in a very exciting space, and that's a really, really big plus. I mean, we're doing exciting stuff. It's not just that it's consumer facing directly, but we're the tip point of technology and kind of like in an industry that's just learning to define itself, and we're getting more and more validation that it's a real thing. It's like it's an actual movement that's going to change humanity at the end of the day, because for the first time, and all is based on a really simple premise. that for the first time, people can truly own digital assets, and it wasn't possible before. And that changes everything. So being a part of that is really exciting, and people love working for us. So I definitely encourage everybody to visit our kind of like our website, see the openings, and apply for what you can.
Amazing. You've got a very active Twitter, so people should also follow you there. And I think you're right. The idea of the future. This is the idea of digital ownership and scarcity of digital assets. Bitcoin, of course, led the way, but it's a pretty simple use case. What you're doing here, it's far more complex. It includes a currency token, but it has so much more because it's actual assets and experience, and you can build your own stuff within this universe of sorts. That's pretty cool.
Yep. Absolutely.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really insightful and great fun hearing about what Upland's bringing to the table. So for our viewers, if you don't mind, please hit that subscribe button. We'll be back with more great interviews from the EOSIO ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.